Welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Ancora, and I'm here to bring you captivating stories from some of the most fascinating people I've connected with on my own journey of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired.
Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Wild Remedies podcast. Beyond excited to bring you today's guest, Veda Austin. I have been waiting so long to connect with Veda. I think we attempted to do this podcast like 3 times. Just had little issues pop up here and there and couldn't connect previously, but we made it happen. And to be honest, this is the coolest one that we've done. This is the coolest podcast. You guys are going to freak out. The information in here is just so next level and so amazing. I don't know if you've ever watched the documentary. Oh gosh, I don't even remember the name of it now. But it's the work of Dr. Emoto, talking about the consciousness of water and the different fractals and shapes that it takes on in a solid state when emotions are projected to water. And fascinating work. And Veda's research builds upon this. And she's discovered even more things on top of this, like water having its own language. She has discovered these almost like hieroglyphics. She calls them hydroglyphs, and they're symbols that water makes to communicate. She also has a process of crystallography where she freezes water in these petri dishes and looks at the patterns that are created at a certain stage of freezing, and gets these really incredible images that are kind of undeniable. It's not like, oh, this is just kind of like a weird interpretation that some artists might be conveying, and, people are just kind of agreeing with it. She sends these images out to large groups of people, and the majority of people seem to identify the image the same way, which relates to the word that was written that gets imprinted into the water, or the emotion, or the photo, or whatever. It's so cool, you guys. And we're going to start off this podcast by having Veda describe the miraculous healing experience that she had with something called fourth phase water, and how it healed her, how it can heal all of us. And yeah, there's so much in here. This is a really long one. This is like a 2-hour interview. It's the longest one that we've done, but it's so worth it. So worth it. Make sure you listen to the end, because at the end is like where the real gold nuggets are. So just a little quick intro about Veda. She's a water researcher, a public speaker, mother, artist, and author. She's dedicated the last 8 years, actually, I think she says 10 years on the podcast, but she photographs the life of water. She believes that water is fluid intelligence, observing itself through every living organism on the planet and in the universe. Her primary area of focus is photographing water in its state of creation, the space between liquid and ice. It's through her remarkable crystallographic photos that water reveals its awareness of not only creation, but thought and intention through imagery. Okay, this is a long episode. I'm not going to draw out the intro. Let's get right into it and meet Veda Austin. Just a quick PSA to let you know that our magic elixirs have gone down in price, and we're keeping it that way. Same amazing quality with real plant extracts and nutraceuticals, like the ceramicides in our Glow Potion that legit plump your skin. And speaking of quality, this is something that is really important to me, and that's why all of our products are crafted with medicinal grade extracts. Unfortunately, a lot of herbal blend brands out there are simply using ground plants that are not extracts. This means that you get very little benefit if you're just blending them up in a milk or a smoothie or throwing them in your morning coffee. Herbal plant medicine needs to be extracted in order to be effective, kind of like tea, which is an infusion, for example. So you need to steep the botanicals in hot water over time to extract the volatile oils that then become bioavailable to your body. So how do you know if a company is using an extract or not? It's pretty simple. They generally clearly state it. It'll be listed as a ratio on the packaging. Like, for example, the 3-to-1 chaga extract in our spiced chocolate potion. We also have a 20-to-1 passion flower extract in our relaxation potion. So very, very easy to distinguish. And actually, speaking of chaga mushroom, make sure that you're getting wild sourced and not cultivated. Otherwise, you're missing out on like the majority of the good stuff, which comes from the birch trees that they're meant to grow on. We use wild Siberian chaga mushroom and it is the best. So extracts are more expensive, yeah, but it's a lot better to invest in something that works than throwing your money away on something that doesn't, right? Rant over. I'm just seeing this so much in the industry right now, and we need to call it out so we can do better as medicine makers, and so we're able to make better decisions as consumers. So if you feel called, check out our collection of high vibe elixirs that support your immunity, skin health, and stress levels at wildremedyshop.com. Veda Austin, welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast. I have been looking forward to talking to you for weeks, maybe months now. I am absolutely psyched for this conversation.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
And where are you coming from? It looks beautiful and sunny. You're in New Zealand, aren't you?
I am. You can probably tell by my accent that I'm a Kiwi, but yes, I'm in New Zealand, and it's a nice day. It's a little bit overcast, but it's always interesting with time zones and things how different the the weather can be, the time of day can be. It's an interesting one.
It is. Well, I'm shocked that it's daylight because here it's 3:40 p.m. And I guess I should know this because I used to live in Malaysia, which was kind of like it was only a 5-hour flight to New Zealand at the time when I traveled there. But yeah, I don't know, it's kind of messing me up. I'm like, how is it daylight there right now? What time is it for you?
It's 10:42 in the morning.
Okay. All right.
But I'm in your future. So it's always that's a weird thing as well. So
yes.
Anyway, for water, it's quite timeless, which is something I'm sure we'll dive into soon.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to talk to you about water today. You have such a beautiful relationship with water. I came across your work. I had interviewed a woman named Kylie Zeck a few podcasts prior. I don't know if maybe you were on her husband's podcast, Alec Zeck.
Yeah. I've met Kylie as well when I was in the States. Beautiful family.
They are. She's so sweet. We had such a great time chatting. And afterwards, I think we talked for like another hour afterwards. She's just like, oh my God, I just love everybody. And I love being friends with everyone. And I'm like, me too. So we had such a great chat. And then she recommended you. She's like, oh my God, you have to check out Veda's work. It's absolutely amazing. And I checked out your Instagram and I was just like, yep, follow, like, amazing. All of this is so, so cool.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we start with how you started this work? I know that there was a healing situation that you had that kind of gave you an epiphany around water. Why don't we start there with that story?
Sure. Well, it was well over 20 years ago now, but I was in a horrendous car accident. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver died instantly. I was the passenger, and the car started to spark, and I came to as soon as the car stopped rolling. And my internal organs were crushed because the seatbelt had basically done what it's supposed to do and protect you to some degree, but at the same time had shattered my collarbone and crushed my internal organs. And the car was on its side, and I cried out for help. And something that I often don't add when I'm telling this story, that I often just forget to talk about, but I always thought was quite interesting, is that the man who was driving behind us, he had stopped and pulled over and was shaking his head because nobody thought anyone could have survived. But he heard me cry out. And so he climbed into the car, which was a very unsafe situation, climbed over the body of the man, which I can only imagine what that must have been like for him, unclipped the seatbelt that I was in, and I fell into his arms, and he took me to the side of the pavement into the gutter so that if I kind of had rolled around in shock or something, I wouldn't hurt myself so much. And that was a very brave thing that he did, because he was there on site before any of the ambulances or anything like that. And I remember seeing my face in his glasses, and it was just white and blood everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
And it was such a lot happened in that moment. And so over the course of nearly 20 years, I guess, I had 8 surgeries from that operation. Most of them were for bowel surgery, because although, again, the seatbelt did what it was supposed to do, it also crushed my organs. And so the scar tissue kind of grew inside my small bowel, which stopped me from being able to digest food. So every time I would try to eat, I would be in agonizing cramping pain and then be vomiting for the rest of the day. And that continued to get worse until I finally had bowel surgery. But when they sewed up the 2 fresh areas of bowel, if we should say, we have a lot of bowel, but that also grew scar tissue. And then the problem came back over a period of time. And the third bowel surgery that I had ended up being the very last operation. The rest were for endometriosis and for my shattered collarbone. And 3 doctors had told me that I would never be able to carry to term or conceive. And it's interesting when you get told by one doctor something, let alone 3. But I was able to put those comments sort of on a shelf rather than put them on a shelf within my own psyche. They were on a shelf outside of myself as someone's opinion, but not necessarily my truth. And I think because I was able to do that, I think that helped considerably, because I hadn't convinced myself that they were right. So I went ahead and had 3 children for every doctor that told me I couldn't, because, well, I can't stand being told what to do, but I didn't have them out of defiance. I mean, they're all really little miracles. But it is an interesting one when you get told something quite seriously, and then you can go ahead and go, well, that doesn't have to be my truth, and it wasn't my truth at all. And so what happened on that last surgery, though, I went in for them to put a stent in my small bowel, which has been fantastic, actually. I've never had any problems since then. And when I woke up, doctors were standing around me looking ominous and saying, "Whoa, you didn't recover very well." Oh my God, I just woke up. How do you know? How do you know I didn't recover well? And they said, "No, you have showers of blood clots in your lungs." And, I was in my early 20s. I'm like, young, fit, healthy, don't abuse my body in any way or any of these things. And I'm like, what do you mean? And so they couldn't tell me exactly why it happened, other than perhaps I had had too much anesthesia over the course of time, or it could have been X, Y, or Z. And so they wanted me to be on warfarin, which is a blood thinner, potentially for the rest of my life. They prepared me for that possibility. And I was in resistance to doing it in the first place, because I don't even like to take, paracetamol for a headache or anything like that. I'm not that kind of person. But I was really told, you're going to die if you don't do this. So I did it for the amount of months it took for my next x-ray, which was clear. And then they wanted me to continue on, and I said, I decided not to. I decided not to from my own choice, and from I've spoken to a lot of other people at that time, and I really believed that my body was able to heal naturally. And so I became very, very interested in everything that I could do to keep my body well. But when you have blood clots, you have something called rouleaus, which are when the blood starts to clump together, and they kind of form like a rugby scrum, and they all kind of get together and huddle around each other and very sticky, whereas what they should be doing is moving around each other quite slippery, in a slippery type of way. And that's what they would normally do in a healthy body. One of the serious things that happens with these kind of blood clots or rouleaus is that your blood pH, and this is an interesting, you hear thrown around quite a lot as a term, is that people will often say alkaline water helps your body be more alkaline. That's a very broad statement. Your blood pH is tightly kept at a very specific pH at approximately 7.34. If it starts to go down, even by the slightest amount, it can be very serious. Or above that, too alkaline or too acidic, something else in your body will become more acidic just to maintain the blood pH. It's so important that our blood pH stay as it should be at a very specific pH. So when these rouleaus start to happen, it's often because there's been a slight change and decline in the pH, ever so slightly. So if your blood pH went below a 7, it's very likely you would die. So it's not just something that is easily going up and down, it's maintained very well. So I knew that something was going on with my body in this particular area. So I spoke to a doctor friend of mine, a medical doctor, but also practiced Ayurvedic medicine. And he recommended to me that I try drinking a natural, emphasis on natural, source of high alkaline water, high pH alkaline water. And in New Zealand, even our rainwater is about a 7.2, 7.3. So I'm like, well, that, anything above a 7 is alkaline. Anything under a 7 is acidic. 7 is essentially distilled water. So I began trialing my body on 2-week trials, drinking alkaline spring water from various different springs around New Zealand. And other than feeling hydrated, I didn't notice any huge difference, because that's one of the things, isn't it? Because we have this meat suit, we don't really see what's going on inside of it. So we don't really know what's happening other than by the way we feel, or the way in which our skin looks, our hair looks, our nails look, things like that.
Yep.
And so I'm like, well, okay, well, I think I'm being hydrated, sorry, and things seem to be going okay, but I'm not noticing anything dramatic, but I wasn't really expecting to. And I had a wellness center by this time, and someone came to me, a client, and she said, I know this man, and he has got an amazing aquifer, and out of the ground the pH is 9.9 naturally, which is extremely high. And she's only giving it to cancer patients. Maybe you want to try. So I went to see him, and he gave me a month's worth of this water to drink. And by that time already, I'd become quite the water connoisseur.
Yeah.
And, and so I was able to actually identify some differences purely by the very first taste.
Like, did it smell different or anything, or it was the flavor?
Well, you shouldn't be able to smell water to start with. Sadly,
I was just thinking if it's more alkaline, because that's quite alkaline, and I don't know if that really
alkalinity
changes it or if it's just slight.
Alkalinity shouldn't change the smell, but it does change the flavor.
Okay.
And many people, when you become very clean in your body, you are able to identify very subtle differences in water. And when you drink lots of different waters and become aware of them, those subtleties become quite pronounced. So there was a difference in a slight sweetness in the water, and the water was slightly thicker than other waters I'd been drinking. And these are subtleties, I would say. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. Like there is a noticeable difference in in the taste. And by day 3, I noticed a change that a lot of people don't want to talk about. But really, I mean, I spent a lot of time in India where people talk about it all the time, and that is bowel motions. And it's a great indicator of your internal health. If you're sitting on the toilet trying to push out a pebble for like an hour, which sadly is many people around the world, then unless there's something seriously wrong, it's very likely that there's another serious issue going on, and that is you're very likely dehydrated. And I can't believe it, but there are people in the world that just never drink water, ever. They drink juice and they drink other things because they don't like water because it's too boring. And so for those people, I would recommend water like a medicine because because there are certain waters that are like medicine waters. And this water that I discovered, um, that I'm about to talk a bit more about, I would suggest is one of the medicine waters around the world, and there are several. So I went to see him, and like I mentioned, he gave me a month's worth of water to try. And within day 3, I noticed that difference, but by day 10, some very strange things had started to happen. And like I mentioned, it's very hard to know what's going on within the body unless you see something coming out of the body or you're feeling something within the body, and so it's a feeling or it's a seeing. And so I saw all of these like bumps coming up on my arm and along my jaw that were super painful. I'm like, oh God, like I know I'm purging, but I don't know why, or like I don't know what. I knew why because I knew I hadn't changed anything else in my diet, my skincare. That I was using this water literally like a medicine. And so I ended up getting some tweezers, as gross as this sounds, because one was like sharp almost to touch, and I picked something out, and it was this little shard of green glass. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I went in and with some help as well. And day 10 and day 12, basically we picked out 27 pieces of green glass out of my body. The reason they were green was because all those years prior, the man who had been in that car who died, he owned a nightclub. And in the back of the car, there were these crates of Steinlager beer, which are these green glass lager bottles. And so when the car rolled, they must have broken on my right side, and the left side got more of the windscreen. And I think my arm went to try to cover my face. And so a particular area of my arm got most of it. But then how does that explain how drinking a certain type of water could purge my body like that? It became a burning question. Because I had a wellness center, I decided to give it to other people and trial it with them to see if it was only me that was having some kind of, amazing effect. And so I ended up trialing a number of people over 2 years, and I put them on 8-week trials. And what we observed across the board is that everybody's eyesight improved. Our eye lens is 99% water. And that actually means that we literally see the entire world through the lens of water. But our eye lens is one of the most highly ordered and structured types of water in our entire body. And in Dr. Carly Nuday's book called Water Codes, you will read there that one of the reasons that we start to lose our eyesight as we age is that our body is so sophisticated that it would rather pull from, and it needs that exceptionally ordered 4th phase water, which we'll talk about soon, in order for the entire body to keep running and functioning properly. So it will pull from that highest source of water, which is the eye lens, to maintain order in all of the other organs. And as you age, well, certainly as some people start to age, if they haven't looked after themselves well, the body will go, well, you don't really need to see, but you need your heart to keep beating. You need these organs to start working. And so it's a slow degradation of the ability to see. And this is an interesting thing because not many people would ever put that down to it being anything about water. Our DNA is, there is layers and layers of this ordered, structured water that surrounds the DNA. If that wasn't there, our DNA couldn't coil. That's how significant this type of water in our body is. And so we saw this really interesting improvement in the way in vision. One lady had to change the prescription on her glasses because it improved so much. We noticed that my father, for example, his name is Bill Hohepa. He's kind of a famous Maori fisherman in New Zealand and does lots of shows. But because he used to go fishing so much, he would often have incidents with fish fins, right? And so he had this fish fin sort of that had somehow gone between his knuckles, and years before, and he thought he'd got most of it out, and so it had just kind of left a scar. Well, after drinking this water, he started to feel this bump starting to come up between his fingers, and this bit of fossilized fish fin started to like make its way out from between his fingers, and it was kind of his knuckles, and it was kind of, it's all kind of gross, but it's also kind of amazing and fascinating at the same
so
time.
Cool. Yeah.
And so we found that a lot of people who had been trying to lose weight managed to lose weight. It's interesting because our fat cells trap acid.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more things that are acidic that we are adding to our body, that our body is kind of where there's an excess of it, rather than putting us into a really serious sort of acidic situation, and to stop it from leaching to go into anywhere else, our fat cells hold acid. So we always have the same amount of fat cells. We don't get more fat cells the more fat we get. Actually, what happens is that the fat cells expand and store more acid. So when your body becomes into a state of ease and stability, it's able to then slowly release and start to become, and knowing that the body is able to release a lot of that acid rather than being overloaded with it. So what people would find is that their body started to come into balance, and then they were able to, this water seemed to act like a water blaster and just really flush out a lot of the acidic waste that they were holding. And so that's a very interesting piece, because for someone like me, who then I didn't need to put any weight on, so my body already knew that. It's not like your body is just doesn't know what it's doing. It knows exactly what it's doing, and it knows how to look after you. And part of putting on fat is the body's way of protecting you from all that acid. So then we noticed there was one man who had stage 4 cancer, and he decided that before he went and did chemo, he wanted to do a very long water fast. So he used this water to fast for 27 days. Halfway through his fast, and that's no food, he observed that he went to the doctors, and they were able to do a scan, and they saw that his tumor had reduced by half. Wow. And then he thought that was great, but they were like, no, we're so worried about you on this fast. And he's like, it's reduced. What are you talking about? And so he continued to do it. And they'd even scheduled him for surgery, like after he'd told them when he was going to finish his fast. But 2 weeks after he'd finished, they couldn't find any cancer in his body. And they still can't. He did the work. It wasn't like the water was probably... I think that there's we're multifaceted. So it's not like just drinking this particular water is going to be your fix all and end all. You need to put the work in too, of which he had also done, working on himself, working on releasing his stuff. But it definitely helped on multiple levels. And to such a degree that no one could believe that he kind of completely was cured. So we noticed all of these. There were actually many, many, many cases. One woman who'd done 2 rounds of IVF managed to get pregnant within the month that she had started drinking this water. And we're not drinking it all day long. This water, the protocol that I advised people is when you're drinking a naturally high alkaline water, you don't want to be drinking it with food. Obviously, our stomach is always acidic, but when it's eating food, it's digesting food, you know that the point of it is to be acidic. So by drinking a naturally alkaline water, it's not that it's not going to do anything bad, but it's not going to really do anything that it's supposed to either. It sort of defies the purpose. So these people would drink 1 liter in the morning when they woke up, about half an hour to an hour before they ate. And then about an hour before they went to bed, or at least an hour after they'd eaten dinner. And that was all. 2 liters of water in the morning and in the evening, and whatever kind of water you wanted to drink during the day. So that was the protocol. And that was enough to make all of these dramatic differences. So then I gauged, okay, now I know that there is something special about this water. Now where do I look? What do I look at to find out what makes it special? So I then did what I would say 99% of people might do, and that is to look at a water analysis. What's in the water? So I'm like, okay, well, yes, there's this high pH. Why is it high? It's because it has a lot of bicarb in it, which is basically like baking soda. So for anybody that wants to make their water more alkaline, get the best water that you have, add half a teaspoon of baking soda to it, and it will bring its pH up to an 8.2, 8.3, which is the pH of baking soda. Baking soda has been said to have a lot of healing properties. There's one doctor that uses a mix of maple syrup and baking soda and injects it into cancer cells. And the cancer is attracted to the maple syrup, and the baking soda is said to kill it. And so this is really an interesting one. So a little bit of baking soda isn't bad. It's not going to make the water taste like, oh my God, amazing. But as a small protocol, and if you don't have access to more natural source of alkaline water, I would prefer to do that than use ionized water any day. I do not like ionized water.
Really? Interesting. So ionized water, that's like those fancy like Kangen machines and things like that are like $5,000 and interesting. Because they do. I mean, I remember somebody that I dated was like obsessed with these things. And you could adjust the pH. And so we always had kind of like an alkaline water. Why do you not like those?
Several reasons. One of the best explanations and most scientific explanation is given on my website. In the frequently asked questions, there is a link to Isabel Friend's whole big massive spiel about the difference between ionized water and naturally alkaline water and all of the science. But here's why I don't like it personally. So a lot of people, when it comes to ionized water, are talking about ionizing machines. They are using tap water and transforming the tap water by putting an electrical current through it, which essentially makes an alkaline and an acidic stream. So, first of all, one of the things that happens when people are talking about ionized alkaline water that's done through a machine is that they'll say, this is the best water in the world. There is no water better than this. And I've heard that a lot. And I've been actually very, very verbally attacked by Kangen people. And it's been really horrible. And I don't usually talk about it because they're so aggressive.
It's like a cult.
You kind of have to look at that, though, because why is there such a defensiveness? So firstly, that statement, this is the best water in the world, is a lie. You know why it's a lie? Because the Kangen machine, as well as any ionizing machine, was based off a natural water. All the origins of ionized water stemmed from a type of water in the Hunza Valley in northern Pakistan, which is called a blue zone, where the people that live the longest and have the best state of health live. They are drinking a glacial water. When scientists went to investigate why these people were living so long, they ended up putting it down to the type of water that they drank. From there, people were investigating what made that water so special. And then they took it back to a lab and they started trying to reinvent that through ionizing machines. But actually, the discovery of ionizing water came from the oil industry, where they found that when they used ionized water, it made it easier for them to drill through the machinery with their machinery, and were able to kind of use it in that arena. So the interesting things that make the Hunza Valley water special. This is a natural water. This is why I'm saying it's not a truth to say this is the best water, because it was based off a natural water.
Yeah.
We have to really look at the origins of things to understand where they came from. And so Hunza Valley water is glacial. So any glacial water is in a state in between liquid and ice. The in-between stage of liquid and ice is known as liquid crystal. That is the fourth phase of water. When Westerners go to the Hunza Valley, when they drink this water, it's so thick that the people that live there have to water it down. It's like drinking a plasma.
Really?
Yes, it's highly rich in silica. And the silica isn't dissolved. It's in these tiny, it's like a colloidal silver in a way. Silica. It's like colloidal version of silica. So it's these minute trace amounts of silica that are in there. It is an alkaline water, naturally. Any fourth phase water has certain properties. It absorbs more light and it has a negative charge. So one of the things that a lot of people that talk about ionizing machines say is that they can alter the ORP of their water, which means oxidation reduction potential. Essentially, it's just a fancy way of saying that whether or not the water is oxidizing you and giving you kind of like free radicals, or whether it's actually improving your health. And so pretty much any water that you take straight out of the ground from a natural spring has a negative ORP. Once it's out of the ground, that's where it becomes a little unstable and will often the ORP will start to go up. So you want it to be under zero, you want a negative ORP rather than a positive ORP. Now, ORP, basically what ORP is a wonderful way to see whether your water is negatively or positively charged. If it's a negative ORP, it means it's a negative charge. If it's a positive ORP, it means it's a positive charge. Positive charge is oxidizing you, like rust. Yeah. Negative is actually a really healthy version for you.
So more of like an antioxidant, right? Which we hear about in foods and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, the issue that I have had with ionizing machines, and I've done many, many studies on them, is that they are not long-lasting or stable. So one of the reasons that the naturally alkaline water stays stable and holds its pH for sometimes even up to a year or more is because of the amount and type of minerals that it has been exposed to. So the reason that the water was so alkaline that I was drinking that helped heal my body, it was because there was a lot of bicarb in the water naturally. It had gone through a lot of lime and things like that, so it was organically in the water.
Yeah.
So when you're filtering the water first and then you're going through this process of electrocution, which some people don't like that term because they think it's a bit too human a term. But essentially, we are it is an electrocution process, and to get that water to go into these two streams, well, a number of things happen with that. Once it's at the pH that you desire, if you were to have that sitting in a glass with no cover on it, within 12 hours, that pH would have considerably gone down. And eventually, it will, quite quickly, within 3 days, it will be back to its original pH. It's not stable at all.
Interesting.
And so this is something I think that is very, very, very different to a natural high pH water, because I've done many tests with the water that healed me because I was so interested in it, and I think I had it for somewhere in the region of 5 to 6 years. I had a sample that I would test each year, and its pH from 9.9, after the 4th year, it had only gone down to a 9.7.
Really? Okay.
And so when I'd done a 9 point, you can go up to like a 10, I think, in the certain machines, ionizing machines. Within 24 hours, it was down to a 6.9, the one I tested.
So it's not stable because it's not natural.
It's not natural.
Yeah.
Water's always it's very clever. Water will always go back to where it naturally sits. It's always looking for its balance. So to further extend on that, I would really highly recommend people go to the link in my frequently asked questions on my website, which is where Isabel Friend goes through this incredibly thoroughly with all the science. So this is an area I know somewhat about, but the way in which she describes it, I cannot recommend high enough, because she has deep concerns for the people that drink that only. And she explains why. So I would suggest that in this world where we are constantly looking to, especially in the more spiritually minded communities, where we're looking for fresh, organic, free range, all these kinds of things with our foods, turning towards something of which is a machine and man-made to ionize water, to make it as close to a water that people have found that was a natural water that helped people stay long and live well. I would suggest that a natural spring water collected is far greater energetically than an ionized water through a machine, because you're still working with the energy of tap water. And I say the energy of water because that's my field of expertise. And people might go, well, how can you have expertise about the energy of water? Well, because I've been studying water crystallographically for 10 years. And I have over 40,000 photos of water responding in a way in which, when I began this work, I wouldn't have believed. And I'm of the mind that when true science, art, and consciousness, spirituality, or intuition, whichever you prefer, overlay, then you have a truth. And what I've discovered in water is that there are 2 types of water within any living thing. The word wairua in Māori, my dad is New Zealand native Maori, wairua means spirit. W-A-I means water, and rua means 2 waters, the spiritual and the physical waters. Within my area of work, I am looking at both, and I'm seeing them and how they form and develop. Now I'm going to extend on that because I realize that needs explaining. But if we want to continue the conversation about the healing water that I found and what led me on to the the area I specialize in now, I think we need to look at what I asked myself. I looked at the analysis. I saw all of this. I'm like, well, yeah, but how is this healing me? Like, how is this doing this to people? Like, what's the special X factor? And I was looking and looking, and I'm like, well, there's nothing like, I mean, other than a high pH, there's nothing striking me here, that's different. It didn't have huge amounts of dissolved molecular hydrogen, but it did have a little. When you look at the holy waters around the world, like the water from Lourdes, for example, or even looking at the Ganges waters, they have large amounts of dissolved molecular hydrogen. But this water only had a little bit of that. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm missing something. And so then maybe I look at what Tesla said. If you want to know the secrets to the universe, look at, energy, vibration, frequency. I'm like, okay, how do I look at that in the water? How do I measure that? And then I'm like, well, let's start with this. All you see and all you know about water when you look at an analysis is what it holds. You don't know anything about the water itself. Science can't even tell us where water originated from. They're in two minds at this point. Some think that it came from meteorites and asteroids, which they think seeded the planet. More are of the mind that there was water already within the Earth's mantle. There is more water held within the ringwoodite of the Earth's mantle than all the seas and all of the water on the surface of Earth.
And that just came out recently. Like I saw there was an Instagram post and it's like the inside of the earth is all water and like there's so much of it. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. I hope there's mermaids.
Well, it's called primary water, and it's actually been known about a long time. And one of the founders of it died a year or two or three ago, and he was able to drill. There were indicators of where it could be. He was able to drill in a desert in Africa and tap into it, and it's been feeding an African tribe with water, hydrating them now for years. And so it's a very pure water. And you can identify this primary water because it doesn't have a lot of solids in it, which means it doesn't have very high, what's called TDS, or total dissolved solids, minerals, salts, these kinds of things. So, and it doesn't have a high amount of deuterium. It would be considered deuterium depleted, which is said to be better for us. One of the ways that science thinks that that water came from meteorites was because when they tested the ice and melted it and they tested the water for deuterium, they discovered that the amount of deuterium was similar or the same as the type of water that's on the surface of Earth. But that primary water is deuterium depleted and has less minerals in it, which is one of the ways but often they'll come together and merge because this primary water can come up through springs, and one of the ways it's that it comes up very, very high as a spring. So when I've shared about primary water, I've tried it twice. It's come down off. It won't let me post. The Instagram and Facebook take it down with no explanation. There's a reason. The reason is that what we keep hearing is that water is scarce, and big pharma, well, not big pharma, but big companies like Coke and Nestle and whatnot are going ahead and buying up all of the springs around the world because where there's scarcity, there's value.
Oh my God. That shit is so evil.
So it's an interesting one. But then anyway, so I went on to go, okay, well, I don't know anything about water if I only am looking at what it holds. So how do I investigate what water is? I mean, you could look at a scientific explanation, say it's hydrogen and oxygen, but then you can look deeper and you could say, well, the two hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity, And the oxygen that is large is the masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create liquid harmony on Earth. So there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So I was inspired to begin my work by three people. Obviously, I began researching, becoming very interested in water because of what I had observed. And so I ended up looking at Emoto's work, and Emoto was not embraced by the scientific community. And the reason is because he openly shared that he cherry-picked his photos to display the best ones showing what he was trying to say, that water is sensitive to thoughts, words, and environment. However, that doesn't take away from the significance of what he showed, because pictures speak 1,000 words. And his work, I think, was an instigator for many people to see themselves as bodies of water that are sensitive to those things I just said. By molecular count, not by volume, we are 99% water. There are more water molecules in our bodies than stars in the Milky Way. When we cut ourselves, we leak. When we cry, we're leaking. When we're sweating, we're leaking. We go to the bathroom, we're leaking. There are several other things of the human body that leak. We are not just the solid meat suit that we think we are. But the interesting part is that we also, if you watch a baby cry, and you'll see this long bit of saliva come out, and it's long and it would like blow in the wind. What's interesting about that is that we are not regular water. We don't open our mouth and water just falls out like a tap. We are, the fact that saliva can stretch suggests that it has unique properties about it. Saliva is 99% water, with only a little bit of sugars in there.
Interesting.
And so our body converts regular water, H2O, into H3O2. It has an extra hydrogen and oxygen aspect to it. So inside of our cells, we have this special type of water. And that is what Dr. Gerald Pollack, who's a friend and mentor of mine, talks about in his book, The Fourth Phase of Water. When you go into the lab, and I've seen how they test for fourth phase water, it's really interesting because something you don't expect happens. If you've not seen this before, they get a little thing of water, and then they put something called microspheres in it, which allows you to see any movement in the water. And then they put something called a Nafion tube in there, which is a see-through tube. And then they look through a microscope. If there is this fourth phase water within the water, so you have this fourth phase water in our cells, but that type of water can be found in other types of water. Not all water, but some. And so if there is that type of water in your water, what you'll observe is that the water, that you can see movement with the spheres that are in there, will start moving through the tube, round and round and round. It self-propels itself. Now, the reason it can do that is because it's created a battery. Dr. Jerry Pollack talks about it as called exclusion zone, so it excludes solates. What it does is the area of exclusion creates a negative charge. It pushes out the salts and minerals and things like that, which creates a positive charge. So when you have a negative and a positive, you have a battery. And so we have these little water batteries inside of our cells, and they expand with infrared light. So having an infrared sauna is extremely good for us. Being able to walk barefoot on the ground, it's negative charge coming up through the earth because the earth is negatively charged. These kinds of things are very beneficial for us. So I looked at Emoto's work, and then I looked at a friend's work. He's become a friend. I used to have like this thing, oh my God, he's so amazing. His work is so amazing. And then we became friends. I'm like, oh my God, Laurent Costa called me. But, we messaged because I don't speak French and he doesn't speak English. So the only way we really understand each other is through Google Translate. But Anyway, he takes amazing photographs in a similar style microscopically to Masaru Emoto, but he has this way of his relationship with water is all about respect. And so he did not want to experiment on water. He wasn't coming from a specifically scientific perspective, but he was using the same method by flash freezing water and then photographing the ice that forms through the microscope. And he would sometimes smile at the water. So for him, he considered water to be his spiritual teacher. He just wanted to invite water to share whatever he wanted to. Like he wasn't trying to see whether it would do something beautiful for a good feeling or negative for a bad feeling, because Emoto's work was extremely contrasting. As human beings, we seem to love the contrasts in life. It's really an interest. It's almost like we're addicted to the best and worst of things and seeing them. Whenever I share something that's contrasting, which isn't as often, it always gets heavily shared. It's like we want to see the best and worst, but life, real life, everyday life isn't really like that for us. We're often have all kinds of bits in between the best and the worst. So anyway, Laurent would sometimes smile at the water before freezing it, and then he was literally photographing smiley faces in the water. He was in the ice that froze. He was seeing fish. He was seeing hearts, and these things were relative to something that had happened in his day, as if water had been with him the whole time. And this was really, really interesting because he's looking at this through a microscope and he's observing that water is observing him. And that intrigued me. And then the third person that really made me begin this work was quite a genius, actually, the more I read up about him. But his name was Thomas Hieronymus. And he made a very interesting observation when he went into a Parisian meat market. He observed that the freshly placed organs of an animal appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And his hypothesis was there seemed to be some kind of life force energy still emanating out of the organ, even though it's no longer attached to an animal. And he put that down to there being water in the blood. And each organ has a type of thing called a sonic signature, which is essentially like a cymatic imprint, if you will. I mean, it's just trying to give an analogy, kind of like a cymatic imprint that holds information for form and function of the organ. And we often forget that there is water in the air. The very fact that we breathe means there is water in the air. And so we also have to look a little deeper at the stage of this organ's blood. So these were very fresh. The blood was still very fresh within hours of the animal being cut up and killed. And so the blood was still very fresh. And there's a transition that tends to happen within water. So when we imagine something dying, all religions and ancient cultures will say something along the lines of the spirit, the subtle body, the soul leaves the body upon death. Well, that's interesting because how does that happen? And if you look into water, and we know so little about water, even though we've been studying it, we think we know some things, we don't. We only know a drop. I feel like I know nothing, even though I've been studying it for 10 years consistently. But what I've discovered is that within the more indigenous beliefs, and certainly within my own culture, we see there is an understanding of a physical and spiritual water. Well, I think the spiritual aspect of water is the observer, like a witness. And if you interview people that have had near-death experiences, as I have interviewed them, a number of them, and 3 of them said the same thing. They said they had the sense of rising, which is what a gas does, and they looked down upon their body being resuscitated with absolutely no attachment whatsoever to it being their body, and they became the observer. There's never any judgment at all when you're in the observer space. We have the ability in our living body to observe ourselves too. People who have had psychedelic experiences and journeys and whatnot may well have been able to do that. My son broke his arm skateboarding some months ago now. And when we took him to hospital because it was a bad break, the doctor said, okay, we're going to give him something called ketamine, and he's going to be here, but he's not going to be here. And I'd never seen
any pain.
So that they could reset his arm. So he wasn't able to feel anything, but he wasn't knocked out completely. They found it the best drug to use for this particular procedure. And within 4 seconds, it was injected in his arm. 4 seconds, Rama said, "What the and he didn't finish the word. And he's 15, right? And his eyes were bulging, his mouth was open. It was so weird because he was here, but he wasn't here. And he was like looking around the room whilst the nurses were yanking on his arm to try to set it and do all of this. And when he finally came around and he was explaining, he said that he was watching them from the corner of the room do it to his arm, reset his arm. He could see himself, he could see them, and he even could remember something that I'd made a joke with one of the nurses. And then he said he went into these wormholes and he went all over the place and did all other kind of crazy fun stuff for him. But he said it was so hard for him to explain the experience, except that he could see himself being worked on. Now, how can we be alive and be observing ourselves? And this then leads into, I've jumped from zero to hero here, but I kind of tend to do that, and I'll bring it back to why I began this work in the first place. But one of the things that I think that is the tether of the consciousness, or the spirit, if you will, is electrical charge. And electrical charge can be measured by heart math. So it's not some woo-woo thing. Yep. It's a very real, measurable thing. So water in the air is very attracted to electrical charge. So essentially, if you think of ourselves as like a liquid antenna, able to receive information and give information out, the electrical charge of our body is like a web, if you want to imagine it like that. I'm just giving analogies. And imagine what dew on a spider web looks like. And imagine on a much more subtle level than that, on a level of which we just visibly can't see but is very real, we have this web of energy around us, which is moving and flowing with our emotions, with our body heat, with all kinds of stuff. And that water is moving with that. The water in the air is attracted to that. So through this web of water, we are able to feel energy. We can go into a room with our energy web, and if something bad's ever happened in that and has a dense energy lasts longer than light energy, we go, I don't know, this place just feels weird. I don't really like how this feels. But how do we know that? We call it intuition. But how does it work? Well, it works because we have this amazing web of water, which is communicating with the other web of water in the air, sharing information. When you meet somebody and you have that love at first sight, or perhaps you have the feeling of knowing someone before, and you just don't know how you know them, but they just seem so familiar and there's something there, our patterns tend to match each other. The pattern of the web seems to be very, very similar to the people we're attracted to. And when we're falling in love, or rising in love, as some people like to say, we not only do our patterns start to mimic each other energetically, but we start doing it physically. You'll notice when people are interested in each other, they'll start, if somebody turns their head, the other person will do it too, subconsciously. And then little things, we actually mirror each other. So rather than it being like a twin flame, it's like a twin pattern. And so this then leads into the areas of intimacy, the absolute sophistication of the fluid that's held within the human body is just out of this world. Even in our deepest sorrow, when we cry, the way in which tears form, they come out of our eyes, they roll around our cheeks, going back towards our mouth, because that's the shape of our face, because they've been reordered and redesigned and restructured to be a medicine to be taken back into the body to help heal our hearts.
Wow.
There is so much more to this human body than we realize, and we are fluid. We keep getting taught about how much carbon we're made of. But again, by molecular count, we're 99% water. And this water is very important to every aspect of life. It's one thing to say water is life, that's a common thing. But it's another thing to say that water is alive. And we need to investigate that, because there are many cultures that believe that to be true. So coming back to how I began my work, what encouraged me was that Dr. Hieronymus had observed something with his naked eye. He had seen these frost freezers with his, just by looking at them. He didn't need a microscope. 10 years ago, I didn't have a microscope, and I was like, well, I want to be able to see if this water memory thing is real. Don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything, that other people say. If you can find out something for yourself, then I really encourage to try. Sometimes we have to make really educated decisions, but nothing beats your own experience. And so I could see that the secret appeared to be in the freezing, where the unseen becomes seen. For all, both Masaru Emoto, Laurent Costa, and Hieronymus. Even Rudolf Steiner says that to observe the patterns that freeze on the window shop of a butcher compared to that of a florist, you'll see they're very different. There is an energy that is held, especially in glass. Glass is mostly silica. Silica is a crystal. Crystals store information. They're in all of our technology. They help water to store information for longer, which is why I only use glass petri dishes. We are not distilled water. We are an ocean. If we had no salt in our body, we wouldn't be able to form any function whatsoever, and we wouldn't be able to remember anything. Salts are really important, and I've got a whole study on salt. Anyway, so you look at that and you go, okay, right. Now what can I do? So I had this spring water that had helped heal my body, and I had a glass petri dish because I was already interested in some other things. So I'm a water researcher. I've always been interested in science. I'm also used to be an artist for many years. I used to paint oil on canvas paintings. So I see the world from an artistic perspective. And I'm very spiritual in the sense that I believe that we all have a life force energy that is not material in the sense that we know it to be. And so I'm very interested in weaving the three together. And so when I thought, okay, what am I going to do? So I put some of this water into a petri dish, and I thought, I'm going to think something and project that thought in the water, and then I'm going to stick it into my freezer, and I'm going to see what happens. This was the most rudimentary thought of how my work began. So as I was holding my dish, and I was like, oh, what am I going to think about? What thought shall I think about? There was a bit of fluff floating around in the dish. So I put my hand in to take out the fluff, consciously thinking, oh, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's quote unquote memory, because I didn't know if that was real. I'm like, oh, well, that thought will do. I shoved it in the freezer with the peas and the broccoli and the ice cream and stuff, and forgot about it. I had no idea or any attachment to any outcome. And so a few hours later, I'm like, oh, I wonder what's happening in there. So I pulled it out, held it up to the light, took a photo on my iPhone. All the photos I've ever taken of water have been on my iPhone. That first photo, So bearing in mind the Petri dish size I used was about the size of an average woman's hand, I guess, about 10 centimeters in diameter. So the image that I saw in the ice took up half of the dish, and it was an unmistakable, undeniable image of a hand that looks like the x-ray of a hand. And to say that I was a little freaked out would be accurate. Because I was not expecting to see that. And it was a little bit weird at the time. I'm like, gee, I didn't see that coming. And then I'm like, oh my God, well, is this a coincidence? Like, my mind was all over the place. I showed my son, I'm like, what does this look like to you? Because he didn't know what I'd done. This looks like an x-ray of a hand, Mum. Kind of a creepy hand. I'm like, 100% looked like a hand. And then I thought, well, if what water would be naturally informed? I went to the ocean and I froze a thin layer of seawater. And I nervously sat outside the freezer thinking, oh my God, if I see something relative to the ocean here, then maybe this isn't random. And the image I took was of this incredible fish with fins, a perfectly round eye, the shape of the fish with a tail. And then my household freezer became my most used appliance. And I couldn't stop myself. But for an entire year, I froze water solid. Now, I haven't done that in 9 years because I discovered something extremely important and significant. After becoming much more familiar with the new science of water, which Dr. Gerald Pollack talks greatly about, but even prior to him, there was a man by the name of Marcel Vogel. So for anyone who really is interested in this topic, I highly recommend looking up Marcel Vogel and water. And he talked about the same stage, this fourth phase stage, as Dr. Jerry Pollack did. And the fourth phase stage, as I've mentioned before, it can absorb more light. It has a negative charge, which is probably one of its most significant things, is the negative charge, because all healthy cells are negatively charged. Diseased cells tend to have a positive charge. So, and it has an ordered lattice-like molecular structure, which is akin to a crystal, except that it's fluid because it's in between liquid and ice. In that stage, water acts like it is able to absorb vast amounts of information. The really interesting thing because I had Jerry Pollack on one of my master classes, and he said that this fourth phase water, someone's been able to actually collect it at a certain stage and dry it out. And it can dry out as a crystal, but it's actually not got any solids in it. So it's like already bizarre. And what they are starting to do is now use this fourth phase water crystal, which has got no solids in it, and can store vast amounts of information and put it into a USB stick
What?
and use it. Yes, seriously, this is one of the things they're working on right now.
Oh my gosh. And they don't know what the molecular structure of the residue is?
The residue and the structures are, I mean, you have to imagine this exclusion zone water is minute, but it's quite large when you're looking at it through a microscope. But it's minute in the you need a lot of it to create this. But it's a bizarre thing that they've started to learn about. I mean, you even think about the term LCD, liquid crystal display.
Yeah.
You start thinking about the areas where we're using crystals but not knowing we're doing it because we don't always know how things are made or what's going on there.
Yeah,
But
like our phones and that's how we receive information is through crystalline structures.
well, that's right. And also within the crystalline structures of our own body. I mean, I recently was in hospital because the weirdest thing happened. A few days prior, I'd had some body work done, and apparently it had relocated or we have these calcium crystals in our ears that have a purpose. Everybody has them, and they're very similar to the calcium crystal we have in our pineal gland and also in the retina of our eye. And so when that's misplaced, you have the worst vertigo. I mean, I had the worst vertigo. I've never had it before, and I just felt like every tiny little movement made me feel like I was falling down a hole. And then I was so sick, and with hyperventilation, my hands couldn't move. I was like so stiff, and same with my legs and feet. And so then I started vomiting, and so the doctors think that the position I was lying in, which was such a weird position, vomiting, actually put the crystal back into place. And then I started to feel better, and now I'm fine. And so it's a very interesting because we have these little crystals inside of our body that do very important things, and if they're out of place, we can feel absolutely horrible. So we don't think about these things. The
Yeah.
fact that we can even store memories is because we're an ocean, not distilled water. The salt aspect is so significant. So if you pardon the pun and you boil it down, we are salts, water, minerals, and consciousness. Now we look at water. Water itself gets called many things. We love to label things as human beings, but we will say that as dead water. You may have heard that term. And that's not a truth. The truth is that water doesn't ever die. It's just always in one of its stages. It can be polluted for sure. It can have X, Y, and Z. It can have not nice structures, but that doesn't mean it's dead. It means that it's in that situation and it will evaporate. When you look at salt, you put salt into water, it disappears, so it changes its structures. So water then becomes a liquid crystal because salt is a crystal, which then also has an electrical charge to it. So you imagine the sea is a giant liquid crystal full of information.
Yeah.
And then when the water evaporates, oh, look, there's the salt crystals. And look, they're in a cubic structure again. How amazing is that? When someone is cremated, the ashes are actually salts. So we're made of two things that don't, if you will, quote unquote, die. They're always in one of their stages. And then you look at consciousness, and that's a whole nother thing because you could look at consciousness over here and talk about consciousness from our conscious awareness of consciousness. And then you look at water and you could see that, oh, they're very different. But when you put them together, you can see that water and consciousness are so intimately intertwined that they actually behave as one. And so then you come to this idea of, is water conscious or is our consciousness impacting the water? And I asked that certain question when I began doing this work and kept seeing this incredible imagery. And by imagery, I'm not just talking about images that kind of look like something. Dr. Jerry Pollack, he suggested to me as a scientific way of going about this, he said, why don't you put 25 of your photographs together with the question, what does this look like to you, and circulate it around as a questionnaire, giving no indicator as to what you're looking at. So I gave it to some friends who circulated around social media, so people didn't know it was coming from me, and they had no idea that they were looking at ice. There were 297, I believe, people who did the study. Just over 85% of people could recognize the imagery for what the influence was prior to freezing. Wow. Out of those 25 images, there were 3 where 100% of people recognized the image for what it was, and one of them was the hand. So I'm not talking about random little makeshift, I can kind of see
somebody's
that.
interpretation of, and then it's, you explain to people what it is, and they're like, okay, now I see it. Okay.
Yeah. So for anyone that's tried to draw, one might see, oh, well, the water is designing at quite a high level of artistry to be able to make it look like something that we can recognize. That's no small thing. So one of the biggest differences between Emoto's work and Laurent Costa's work and my work is that Laurent and I are both seeing images. And Laurent also saw geometries. No, Emoto saw geometries. And of course, the world is and the universe is made up of sacred geometry, and we are very attracted to geometry. But images, pictures are really interesting because they are something that are very very organically human. There are plenty of cave paintings and plenty of images where we've been drawing what we see, where we express ourselves from nothing to something. We create from some kind of charcoal on a wall in a cave. From there's nothing there, and then now there is this design that is showing people for thousands of years to come what they saw. We are, again, we are sophisticated bodies of water. We can do so many things, express so much of what we see and experience in the world through art. So the fact that art is what I'm investigating here is actually way more sophisticated than people give it credit for.
Oh, absolutely.
And so when I became more familiar with this fourth phase of water, I began to question and wonder, well, why is it that, when is this fourth phase water happening in the freezer? So going back to something I mentioned about the Hunza Valley water as it's freezing, but before it's frozen, is in that fourth phase stage, and as it's melting, but before it's liquid. So I'm like, well, let me try and find that stage. So I would open my freezer earlier and earlier and earlier to see when the formation of design was happening. And back then I had a very efficient freezer, which I really do miss, which was set at about 26 degrees, minus 26 degrees in Celsius. And so after about 4 minutes and 30 seconds, I noticed there was liquid on top and ice underneath in my petri dish of water. So I would pull it out. I pulled it out and I drained the liquid away. And there I saw the most incredible crystallography, which is what we call the ice that is adhered to the glass dish, of which showed imagery far, far more sophisticated than any I had seen in solid frozen ice. Now, I look back at my work now in the very early stages where I froze water completely, and I'm absolutely amazed that I got the imagery that I did, knowing now how water freezes. The kind of imagery we get now is so three-dimensional. There is so much clarity because it's only millimeters thick. It's like 3 millimeters thick. It's so thin, this layer of ice, and it is what we call the first freeze. So water freezes in 3 main levels, 3 main stages. The first freeze is where we take the sample out. That is when water is in its purest state. It has the first freeze has the least amount of solids in all of that water. So it's pushed all the solids out. So we have a fourth phase water sample, which is basically showing us this incredible sophisticated art. The next stage is the second freeze. It has usually a certain amount of space in between the first and second layer. And then it creates like an ice sandwich. There's liquid water in between the 2 layers. When the liquid water has frozen, which holds the most total dissolved solids, that's where you get that cloudy look in your ice, and it starts to darken the ice. So once that's happened, it's like you're lucky if you can see anything of the first freeze. So water must have been, I can only think that water must have been wanting to communicate something so desperately to me that it actually somehow made that happen, where you could see things as clearly as we did in a frozen sample. So knowing these 3 stages is significant because then you can look at it like a glue and glitter picture. When I was a child, the teacher would give me like a piece of paper with a glue stick, and you'd draw it like a heart or something with the glue, and then you'd get some glitter or sand and you'd sprinkle it on, and then you'd shake the remaining glitter or sand away, and you would have like a picture with glitter in the shape of the glue. Your conscious expression is the glue. The first freeze is the glitter that's stuck to the conscious glue. The water that you're tipping away is the potential, is just potential. And so if you tip that water away into another petri dish, you get a secondary layer of information, and you can continue on this kind of conversation with water. Now I have, like I've mentioned, over 40,000 photographs of water designing in these incredibly sophisticated ways. And I have used images, as pictures, photos, media, thoughts, songs, words, all different kinds of inspiring influences. And I've approached this not as a person who is experimenting, but as a person developing my relationship with life force energy that we call water. And by doing that, water plays with me very nicely. But the moment that I think that I know what it's going to do, or I expect it to do something, or if I am frustrated or annoyed, it simply will not design for me. That is because water is wild. Water literally is wild. And you know the feeling you get if you go into a forest and you know all the animals in the forest are wild. If one of those animals, whether it's a bird or a rabbit or a deer, somehow makes its way to you and even better, somehow will eat out of your hand, you know that feeling you get, which is like, oh my God, this is like the best day ever. I've made this animal feel so safe that, or it likes me, or these kinds of things. The reason we feel so different from going to like a petting zoo where all the animals are there and they're used to people and everything compared to a wild animal is we know they're wild, that they've chosen us, they've come to us. That is the approach of which I take with water. I know that water is choosing to play with me. It's not there because it's there to at my beck and call. This is not about experimenting on water. God, I'm a body of water. I don't want to be experimented on. Why would it?
Yeah.
The only difference between me and the body of water or the water that's in my petri dish is that I've got a skin and bones. This is interesting. Outside of, we then look, well, what is water? And I think that with the work that I've done with tap water, now we've become extremely like water snobs in the Western world. We're very fortunate because we don't have to walk miles and miles and miles for our water like they do in India and Africa. And in certain spiritual communities, it's interesting because we've become very against certain waters. So tap water gets the worst rap because tap water has heavy metals, it's gone through piping, it's disordered, it's denatured, it's got X, Y, and Z going wrong with it. It gets one of the worst raps. You don't want to go near tap water. Again, first world problem. But tap water, and I'm not talking about drinking it, but I'm talking about what it's taught me. Tap water is one of the most responsive waters crystallographically of any of the waters. And I'll tell you why. People think, how is that possible? All those heavy metals must be like, and all of that kind of like, horribleness, we must be blocking its circuits and stuff, or whatever they think and say. But actually, we're looking at and studying a much more subtle aspect of water than what most people think water is. So when I've done studies, and so water, I would say, and if you just bear with this term, communicates in 3 types of ways. Most people with my work know my work of the art of water. I always say art is the heart of water. But there are 2 other ways as well as that. And when you're beginning this work, as I teach people how to do it, I always say, invite water to share with you whatever it wants. Don't launch into this expecting water to do what you want. It's not all about you. Water is a spiritual teacher in this sense, in that it knows its boundaries. It's like getting to know someone first. Otherwise, it's like meeting someone and go, will you marry me? It's like, oh, we don't even know each other. You get to know the person first, at least to some degree. You kind of get a sense for them. So there is this idea so we have signature patterns anyway, before I go into that other conversation. A signature pattern is an identified pattern that I see in tap water, rainwater, spring water, and filtered water. Those are the three most defined signature patterns. All of these patterns, all of the patterns of water that form organically as signature patterns stem from the hexagon. So spring water collected within half an hour and frozen within half an hour of collection will form very large hexagonal patterns that I call the fern hexagon. If you imagine the star shape that's within a hexagon, off each leg of the star are ferns, and they form a hexagonal shape. The more vibrant your water is, the larger the hexagon will be. Sometimes the hexagons can take up the whole dish. Now, as a hexagon degrades, the further away from source it gets. It goes from that hexagon, then it turns into a flower shape. That flower shape turns into a kind of it slowly makes its way down to a small little dot. The other way it can degrade is that the fern leg will come off, and then you'll just see a fern, and then that will break its way down to a line. So you're left with lines and dots. Tap water is full of lines and dots. So it's made its way down through these things. Now, variations of that is where you will see the signature pattern of filtered water, which is a bunch of lines compacted together. So rainwater, for example, it looks like a fanning pattern, like a fan with a curve. And like I said, tap water is very disordered. So when you know the signature pattern of your water, then you know if it's changed. Getting to know the patterns organically of your water is really important. So we start to build relationship and trust. And so with tap water, you can take tap water, you understand, I'm talking municipal tap water forms disordered patterns. So when you melt the crystallography of that sample, and then you hold that melted sample to your heart in a loving, intentional way for even 1 minute, and refreeze it using the same exact water, you'll start to see ferns occurring. Might even see little tiny hexagons come back. What we're seeing is so important because it's changing structurally, but it's not changing chemically. So what is it? And the only thing that you can really akin that to or liken that to is an emotion. And what if water is like liquid emotion that we can see? I mean, we talk about emotions. What is an emotion? The only way we can explain it as an emotion is by saying, I feel sad when X, Y, Z, and tears come out of my eyes and I make a sad face. I feel angry when X, Y, Z, and I look like this when I'm angry. One goes and buys angry from the store or buys angry from or happy from the store as a thing. It's not tangible but it's very, very real for us. Our emotions are a big part or a huge part of like what makes us human. And yet it's not something that we can say, oh, there's happy over there, and yet what if water actually has a great deal to do with emotion?
Yeah.
And it's not surprising that in our greatest joy, when we're laughing and we're laughing, or we're crying and we're crying, that we're crying, we're leaking. Even if you look at the way in which people are conceived, we're conceived through fluids, and then we gestate in a fluid sac. I have always thought that ancestral information is shared through the amniotic fluid. And so we have all of that going on. But we look in the mirror with our fourth phase water eyes and we see ourselves as so solid. When I teach in schools, I always say to the young children, if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, what would you look like and how would you recognize your parents? And it always comes back to we would look like streams and tributaries and waterfalls. One boy said he looked like a brain-shaped cloud with electrical rain shining down through his body in the shape of a human. I'm like, my God, that's amazing.
Profound.
Yeah. And one girl said, well, I'd always know my mummy because of the way she feels. back into that sense of feeling. So when we think that we can, so then anyway, this is kind of then, um, I've moved on to doing so much crystallography with faces. So I saw that water really loves to design an imagery. So I would use photographs of people to see if it was able to be interested in their features and design them.
And when
And
you're
now,
doing this, so you're basically like, just to explain the process to people, like, so do you sit down a photo, or
mhm,
say like you write down a word or something like that, and then you put the petri dish with the water on top of it, correct?
that's right, for
Okay.
30 seconds,
Okay.
and then remove, and
Mm-hmm.
then freeze using my short-term method of crystallography. And then photograph. And I always take a backed out photo and then a one slightly zoomed in photograph. And you take them as quick as you can, because unlike a motos worker who is in a cold room, I'm in my kitchen. So you can take maximum, maybe 3 or 4 photos maximum, before the water starts to melt or the ice starts to melt. So it's in real time. So I can't take hundreds of photos and choose the best one. I
Yeah.
can only take what I can take. So, so I've identified that water can easily identify the features of different people. And I share that. I'm actually writing my new book. And so I have thousands and thousands of images that I'm sharing. And it's quite fun for me to do it, because to put it all in one place, you can't, even for the very, very skeptical. And of course, naturally, people can be that way, because it seems crazy. Well, how can water really respond in these artistic ways and identify us and through imagery? How's that possible, right? So I have a quantum physicist who's explaining some of this, and getting into some of the deeper science, because I'm not a traditional scientist, I'm a researcher, right? So I share what I see. It's up to science to help me figure out what's happening. And so that's been extremely helpful, because water in its liquid stage is updating its information every trillionth of a second. So some of the people that were very skeptical of Emoto's work and this idea of waters having memory, quite rightly will say, well, but water's in molecular chaos. How? It's not in the slightest bit interested in you. You're a bleep on its radar. What do you mean? Water memory, right? And then after speaking to my friend Dave from the quantum physics perspective, I asked him that question, and he gave me an answer that was so helpful. He said, there's a really big difference between molecular chaos and molecular excitement. He said molecular excitement is a very different behavior than chaos. When something's excited about something, there's something it's excited about. And conscious expression is all about light and photons. So I'm going to share a couple of things. And I know for my work, pictures speak 1,000 words.
Yeah.
So by seeing the work, you kind of get why I'm so enthusiastic and why other people are really interested in the work. Because firstly, 40,000 photos is not a small amount. Even 100 photos is a lot. So that amount of photographs of water behaving in this way is hard to not see as a consistent thing. But then you start looking into some more the quantum aspects, which is really quite interesting. And you start the kind of looking at ideas of photon transfer, the idea of transference via photons. So photon is an aspect of light, essentially. Water holds lots of photons. And so water has a light source. I was once talking to someone who said that they could speak to bees. And she said that she would watch the bees around their hives for long periods of time. And eventually a bee communicated to her and said, "We don't mind you looking at our hive, but please don't look at it for so long, because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we like it to be darker."
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, so where you put your conscious expression is also where you put your light. Now, one of the wonderful things that I've observed every now and then at the perfect time in the freezer, is that as water's just beginning to freeze, it's just sent out a little thing that looks like a spear of an icicle. There is a light source that comes out of that icicle that looks like a halo. And I've photographed it several times now. So I think it is actually light that paves the way for the design of the imagery that I see in my work. And if our conscious expression is affecting the way the photons are exciting the photons in the water and giving it more light. This is an interesting feature when fourth phase water absorbs more light. I've mentioned it a few times now. We have this interesting exchange of information. But then again, you're looking at a spiritual aspect of water. So when we look at the tap water and we see that the tap water improves, and I've seen that multiple times. I've also seen, similar to Luc Montaneur's work about DNA teleportation, which is like, that's crazy amazing. And he won a Nobel Peace Prize for discovering AIDS. So he's a very serious scientist. And he discovered that if you put two kind of test tubes of water side by side, one with only water, one with a sequence of DNA, and you put them side by side in radiant light with a low hertz frequency for 12 hours, I think, or something, or overnight, then you take away the one that's got the DNA sequence and you put a precursor to DNA. Basically, it sees if there's any DNA in the water. He discovered that there was a sequence of DNA that matched the other one in the water that had nothing in it before. That's why they call it DNA teleportation. And that was repeated. Now, sadly, he passed away in the last year, but I was the last speaker at the banquet at the annual water conference where I actually got to meet Luke back in 2019. And he is and all of the scientists that work in this field of water, the water scientists, they have to bust their butts to really cover their whole scientific procedures because it's so hard for them to be taken seriously. The world at large just thinks water is water is water.
Yeah. Well, I mean, society as it is now, in indigenous cultures were much more respectful to water. And, from what I've learned, it was revered as, almost like a person, like you're communicating with the waters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, we were the first country in the world to give the rights of personhood to a river. The
Really?
Whanganui Maori tribe, for many years, pushed the government to try to give them the opportunity to care for their river. Um, there's a saying that the health of the river reflects the health of the people. What they saw was that the belly of the river was being scraped to take the gravel away. The mouth of the river was being fed effluents, and the head waters were being diverted. To them, the head of the body is the most sacred. So for them, that was aquatic decapitation. And they were so upset that New Zealand government was able to finally give it rights of personhood. So now that tribe cares for that river. And that led on to the River Ganges and the River Yamuna in India being given the rights of personhood. Although I think it's very difficult to care for it in the same way that we do in New Zealand because it's such a huge population and so many people go to bathe and worship there. So you're right in that sense, but also my friend Kalani Souza, a Hawaiian elder that I just adore, he says water is a relative, it's not a resource. And I say water is a resource, is a source, not a resource. So it's sort of, we're all sort of saying the same thing. In Old English, in the old times before Romans discovered plumbing, water wasn't called water. It was called the waters. It was considered this divine body of water that was actually holy. When we started to see water taking waste away, there was a visual change in the way we perceived water. plumbing made us realize that water was suddenly taking waste away. It can't be as holy as we used to think it was. And so it got degraded to being called water. And then now, we call it H2O, but where waters or the waters is still talked about, as we say, her waters broke. It's still termed with sacred water, as in the amniotic fluid of the for the baby. So, it's interesting when you start looking into the history and the degradation of the way that we've seen water.
Yeah.
And I think there's a renaissance happening, gratefully, where people are starting to really see that there's so much more we can do. So one of the things I love being able to do with this work and with the tap water is kind of giving tap water its dignity back. So one of the things that I see about that is that there are certain words in Maori. One of them is mauri. It means life force energy, right? The more life force energy you have, the more mana or spiritual presence can enter. So what we're seeing is an energetic state of health in the crystallography that we're looking at. It's not just about whether this water is safe to drink or we're not looking at it from that perspective. What we're actually seeing is a communion with the spirit of water.
Yeah.
And that has a lot more to do with us as living beings than we realize yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the podcast episode that I just released yesterday was all about my journey into learning how to communicate with plants, right? And it's the same energy, really, right? And the natural world is full of life and full of consciousness, and we've been disconnected from that for a long time. But I think people are starting to realize that there's something there. And the work that you're doing, I think water chose you, right, to be able to give this message to people, because this is something that people can do at home, right? Like, you teach people how to do this water freezing technique at home, and you can start having a relationship with water.
Yeah, for the last few months, I've been mostly sharing other people's work. I think it's significant that we see that other people can get the same type of images and same responses. The third way that water communicates is through hydroglyphs. And we've been talking a long time, so I'll touch over that really quick. But a hydroglyph is a symbol in ice that has one or more energetic meanings that I've discovered by writing a word, putting my petri dish of water on top of the word. Water doesn't read words, it absorbs the energy of words and crystallizes into the energy of a word. And if I've seen that same symbol appear using the same word at least 50 times, then I have one hydroglyph. If I want to know its layer of meaning, that means that I'll see the same symbol with a different word and I know, that's its layer of meaning. It's taken me nearly 4.5, nearly 5 years, and I only have 40 hydroglyphs as well as some of their layers of meaning because it takes so long. But it is wildly significant because water doesn't normally do these kind of repetitions. And I think it must be just like a really, really kind teacher. It's like teaching someone music. You have to listen to it over and over and over, especially with the violin. And so, and yet the teacher has to be like, yes, no, here we go, here we go, here we go. You'll get it in the end. So by 50 times seems to be when water says, no, you've got it now. Okay, this is the amount of times that I'm going to do this for you. But I have a team working around the world that have also identified these glyphs using different words sometimes, not different words, I mean, in different languages. So in Hindi or in like Russian or something, and we'll write that word. One man, for the word creation, it's a very beautiful wave-like pattern. It's very identifiable. So he was playing a chant, which was all about creation, and he saw the creation glyph. It's what I mean. We start to see things where they're very relative to the word, but I discovered them from looking at music, because Emoto's work is very contrasting. It is heavy metal, like, versus classical music, right? Or love versus hate. But my son came to me once and he said, Water must hate me because he'd seen Emoto's work. I'm like, why? And he said, because, well, I don't really like classical music and I don't really like heavy metal. He said, but I like rap and I like Tupac, and Tupac swears. And so obviously Water must hate me. I'm like, oh my God, no, Water is not in judgment. That's one of the dangers of the contrasts. If you can't, especially for children, if they can't find something to identify with, they often assume the worst. And so I did so many different genres of music to show that what Water would do. And after doing that, I realized that Water seems to love to pick up on a word of a song and design something relative to the word. So when I did Stairway to Heaven, I kept seeing the stairway. And when I repeated, I saw the stairway again. And then I'm like, yeah, let me write the word and see if that happens. And then the stairway happened again and again and again. So these all my work has happened organically and out of curiosity, but at the same time, it's very significant.
It is. Absolutely.
Well, that's my humble opinion. That's what I think, because I'm working with water. This like that. The point is that this isn't my work. This is the work of water. I'm a medium really for it to share, and we've developed this relationship. So it's kind of a co-creation. But I mean, I couldn't do it without water.
It's so cool. Like, one thing that my mind keeps going to is homeopathy. It's something that I've been working with personally lately, and I had someone on the podcast, Dr. Lisa Strabach, and she was explaining the concept of like paper remedies, right? So like writing down the name of some type of medicine and then putting the water on top of it, and then being able to consume that and actually have a medicinal benefit from it. And there's still so much that people don't understand about homeopathy and why it works, but it is working for a lot of people. And I think all of these things are starting to, reveal themselves to us, and we're just kind of piecing it all together. But it's a completely different paradigm than what, we've known for, millennia at this point. Yeah.
Well, in a similar vein, we've discovered that when you eat the ice of the crystallography after learning the technique, after using a word, the water, remember, it's taken on and gone in form. So in form is an interesting word because it's information. It's formed into the energy of that word. So if you write the word rest and you're having insomnia, and then you eat the ice afterwards, it takes, for something quite serious, it seems to take about 10 days, a week to 10 days of like just eating the ice, where people have started to see significant improvements. One lady was vaccine injured. I did a live with her, Rachel. It's on my Instagram. And she has been using this ice eating protocol that the children taught me. Actually, my children started eating ice and they were like, why? I said, why are you doing that? Because they said it's good for them. There's a whole story about that, but I know we're running out of time a little. But the essence of this is that she used it as a protocol every single day. She would write a word. The word will come out of the well of knowledge within you. It might not even have anything to do or seem like it has anything to do with what is going on for you, but you have to trust that your intuition knows exactly what you need to write. So she would write the word, always eat the ice afterwards. And she kept all her words. So she started with the word connection and used that for about a month. And then as she started to heal, she started to shift and change her words. And now, and her vaccine injury was so bad, she couldn't even walk. I didn't know it was as bad as it was. Anyway, now she's got a clean bill of health. She's nothing wrong with her. And she puts it down to various different forms of movement, as well as the protocol of this eating the ice. Now, what are you eating? A similar way you were talking about homeopathy, which is the kind of spirit of the plant. So people say to me, well, how come it is that the more diluted a homeopathic remedy, remedy is, that it's more potent. Like, how does that work?
Yeah.
It's less and less and less of the thing. Well, that's because it's becoming more and more and more in spirit. Someone said to me that death is kind of like taking off an uncomfortable shoe. And it's this idea that the more towards spirit we become, the vaster we get. And so in my area of research, I would suggest that that's very real. And so in this area we're talking about, I think that there's a lot to be said anyway for studying these subtle energies, because when you're eating ice, not only is it in its most clean fourth phase stage in this first freeze, and it's formed into a very specific form for you. It's all about relationship, remember? And then and then you start hearing more and more and more. I mean, it's been only a year that I've shared about this eating crystallography, but the amount of people that have tried it and come back to me and said, wow, I mean, it's got rid of my headache immediately. It's got this and that and the other thing. There's been no clinical trials. This has not been, I don't even know if it would be taken seriously within any kind of area other than people that were very open to a more holistic view. However, it doesn't really matter, because you've got nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose to try it. And lots of people have found that it's extremely helpful for them. And if you already understand the concepts of homeopathy, then this will be something that you understand. I only use this method if I am really feeling that I need something extra. I like to drink water for two reasons. Obviously, to hydrate me for all these functional reasons, but the more water I drink, the more relationship I form with it. So no matter what kind of water you drink, whether it's the best water in the world or it's best you can get, right? Our terminology of that, then it's going to work or help heal you in direct relationship to how you receive it. You are the welcoming committee. Your saliva carries the information and the resonance of the last word or sentence you spoke. When I've done studies on so many different fluids, including bodily fluids. And when we've studied saliva, we even see imagery relative to the last word in the frozen saliva. So by observing that, we need to remember, if we're a body of water, what is the first liquid that the water we're drinking or the food we're eating is going to come in touch with? That is going to be our saliva. We understand the power of saliva when we are interested in someone. If we're on the fence about somebody and we're like, oh, I kind of like you, you seem really nice, and da 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 da, that first kiss is going to tell you whether you actually really attracted to them, whether that spark is there. It's going to give you biological information based on all of these different subtle aspects that you can't explain, but you just feel. That's because the saliva is sharing information between the both of you. And that includes as to how biologically compatible you are. All different kinds of stuff is going on just in that first kiss. So imagine what's happening when we're more intimate and we take things more further. And my daughter's there, so we'll leave it there. But I do get into that because I think it's very significant, conscious creating with a partner who is another body of water, who is a life force energy. And when there is conscious kind of connection between the two, when you start studying the power of spinal fluid, which is 99% water. And Dr. Mauro Zappadera, who's an amazing guy, I'm fortunate to know him, and he was on one of my master classes. He's a Harvard doctor. He is literally saying that the spinal fluid is the portal to cosmic consciousness. And then you imagine and you think about that, and you think about the way in which we intertwine and we share information, the way babies are conceived through fluids. It is really remarkable, because everything that is alive has become alive through water.
That's fascinating. Well, in that concept too, with Kundalini, right? The rising of the
Yeah,
Kundalini.
exactly.
And yeah.
That's kind of where I'm leading into that,
Yeah.
um, because that's a very real thing. And so, we kind of like look into all of these areas, and then we think about communication with, you were talking about plants. Well, obviously, the plasma in the plants is the communication system. It's the water, even down to, and I know this is kind of funny, but um, there's I can't remember the name of the movie, but there's some movie where Aquaman and Batman are having a conversation, and Batman jokingly or somehow is saying to Aquaman, oh, so I hear you talk to fish, and Aquaman says, no, the water talks to the fish. And so it's this idea that water is the communicator through all life, including plants, including trees. I have a friend called Gary Cook, who's quite well known in New Zealand. And he has this machine where he can read the songs, the sounds of plants, and the sounds even of water inside the water. And so he was talking to me and saying that um, when there are certain whales that come through New Zealand and on their way migrating, and he says their whale song can travel so far through the ocean, but what we don't realize quite often is that it travels across land, and it crosses over the beaches and into the forests, because in New Zealand we're an island, so you're never far from a beach or a forest. And so in the old days, there were many more whales that used to come, and they would call, and that call was heard by the kauri tree, which is one of our sacred native New Zealand trees. The kauri tree would reply. So he's gone and he's got the sound of the kauri tree, and he's going out on a boat to put the sound thing down into the ocean to see if it will attract the whales to come back.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, my mind is blown on so many levels. Thank you so much for
No,
sharing.
you're so welcome.
Well, I mean, and I think what everybody who has been listening to this podcast is wondering is where can they get this healing water?
Oh, well, actually, the good news is that um, on my Instagram and Facebook, I've just posted the email for another source. So the guy that I used to get the water from was he's quite an older man. He sold the property, and then I wasn't having any access to it anymore. But a mile and a half or so up the road from there, and the aquifer is huge. There's a friend of mine, Roz, who has the authority to give the water or sell the water and get it. And so he's a gorgeous property. He loves my work. He loves the water so much, and his children, everybody loves the water, right? And they talk about it all the time. And so he said it's like he's your organic water farmer. He said, and so the pH of his water has changed slightly because it's a little bit further away. Again, same aquifer. So instead of being 9.9, his is 9.6, but he guarantees 9.5. It can change seasonally by 1. So it still has all these beautiful properties. It's the same water, just slightly further up, and it's the same aquifer. So yeah, you can. I'm probably going to add it onto my website too. Although he says he's speaking to me today because he wasn't expecting to be so flooded
I bet.
with people wanting to get that water.
Mhm.
So I can share the email with you if you want. That's no problem, and people can reach out to him. So
Cool.
uh,
That would be amazing.
yeah,
And I mean, and if people, maybe don't have the time or the resources or whatever to order the water, I know for myself, a really great resource. So I collect my own spring water.
perfect.
Yeah. And then I run it through, and I don't even think I need to do this, but I ended up getting a Berkey filter. And so I put the water through there. And actually, I would love your opinion on it, because to get to the spring, it's like a 20-minute drive or so each way. So I take a couple of large containers, and I really hate using plastic, but I've tried to use big glass jugs before.
Yeah.
And it was such a nightmare because they were so heavy and slippery. And I ended up breaking one by like the sacred water place. And I felt so horrible. I was just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I'm like cleaning up all the glass and stuff. And I was just like, okay, this is not good. So I've been using these, BPA free water containers. But I only go like every 2 or 3 weeks. Like I try to take enough water with me because it's a bit of an excursion. And I've been reading some of your posts, and you're like, water shouldn't be still, right? And it should be in like these blue glass, like there's other things that you can do that water seems to like better.
There are nice things you can do. And I mean, we can only do what we can do.
Yeah.
Your intention can make a massive difference as to the water's state of health.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that even tap water can start to look like spring water through your conscious intention and observation of it. We're looking at very subtle aspects here. And so what we do, and you're right, it is extremely heavy. And so a lady recently just sent me this quite telling crystallography that she'd learnt my technique, and so she picked up some water and she collected it in what she had, which was a plastic container, and it was this beautiful stream water in London. So she was wanting to do the crystallography, not London, sorry, in the English countryside, and it was near like a sacred site, and she thought, oh, it's going to go gorgeous, but she was worried that she'd collected it in plastic. And so the crystallography looked a little bit disordered, and she decanted it into a glass container, and then she did the crystallography for that, and it actually looked remarkably better. So what we do, if we don't, because we don't all have access to giant glass containers, and it isn't always practical. And you're right. If you can go and collect your spring water, it is the best. You're forming a relationship with the actual place where the water's coming from. That's ideal. You can go to find a spring and find where a spring is close to you.
It's
And
such
water's
a great site.
water's been filtered through the earth. We often worry about that, but water's gone through so much filtration already, going through the earth once it comes up as a spring. So where I was kind of going with that, I think, is that where there is, I'm just trying to grab my train of thought again. Where was I going with that? Can you remind me?
Water sitting in the plastic, and
yeah. So we tend to get large containers of water and then decanter it into hourglass units. And the main thing is with spring water, it's living water. We might call not that water dies, but this idea that water has just come out of a spring. So it's it's already beautiful in its crystallography, but it's very sensitive to light. So when you go to a store and you buy spring water, and you come back, you do crystallography, and you wonder, oh, why doesn't it look like the spring water from your pictures? And the reason is because any water that's been collected and put into a clear glass or plastic bottle means that it's affected by the unnatural artificial light. And that impacts it quite greatly structurally. And so by putting it into a dark, cool space will be a very helpful thing. Another really, really helpful tip that I'll give you is that I've spent a lot of time in India and out in the villages. And I went out there and I saw 3 women doing something interesting. 2 of them were holding a silk sari. One was pumping water from a big old pump, and the water was filtering through the sari into a bucket. When I asked what they were doing, they said that the filtering water through silk helps to purify the water, but when you drink it, it helps to purify the heart. And I found that really interesting because Dr. Jerry Pollack talks about how the exclusion zone or 4th phase of water expands even sitting near silk. So what I suggest to people, if they're handy, is to get a recycled silk sari or something and make a bag to cover your water bottle in. So firstly, that's going to keep it dark, but it's also going to give it that extra help, that fourth phase help by being near the silk. So silk and a glass bottle. The glass is silica. It's going to help water store information for longer. The silk is going to help to maintain its integrity. The point, though, is to drink it all the water as fast as you can. You don't want it sitting there for ages and ages.
Okay.
So by doing it every 2 weeks, your water is still going to be beautiful.
Oh, good.
So I think we think too much about that.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We think, oh my God, it's going to look terrible. But that's where we forget. If we say something beautiful about the water, it's going to reflect us. When we drink it, that word is so potent. You look biblically. I'm about to do a masterclass in June over 3 days, June 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The topic is what different religions, cultures, and ancient texts can teach us about water. I can honestly say it is going to be the most important and significant masterclass I might ever do. And it isn't teaching people about how to do crystallography, because I teach that in the beginners workshops. I have over 20 people from around the world speaking about the significance of water within their culture or their religion. It's one of the only times we can get all the world religions and cultures all together agreeing and sharing about this truth that is water. Water is mentioned more times than love in the Bible. But what's interesting is that when you look into the Bible, for example, it says there was the Word. So this Word is super important. And then God spoke upon or hovered over the face of the deep or the waters. So water was there and it had a face. And so this is really interesting when we start diving into this, because I think if we actually want to understand about water and we understand what it is this crystallographic method is showing, then the real direction to go is by learning about the spiritual aspect of water. If we don't know that, we're only ever going to know a certain amount of science, a certain amount of biology, a certain amount of the practical aspects of water, but we're not really going to know water. And given that that is what we're made of, and the whole entire living world cannot live without water, and the fact that we don't even really know where it came from, I think it's very, very important that we look in this direction.
Amen, sister. I agree. And with everything, right? Like I'm a Pisces moon, so I look at everything with a spiritual lens, and am quite tied to water. Pisces being a water symbol, and I go to my healing happens in water. I always joke that I have my breakdowns in the bathtub. It allows me to release just getting in the water for some reason, but well, for obviously many reasons. But yeah, I think we're at such an exciting time right now with all of this information coming to us. And thank you so much for all of your amazing research and this work. It's just so exciting.
You're very, very welcome.
Okay, well, we are at the end of our time. How can people get in touch with you to learn more about the techniques, your master classes, all of your Instagram? Everybody needs to go and look at Veda's Instagram right now. In these pictures, they're so phenomenal.
Thank you. My website is my name, vedaustin.com. And my Insta is VedaAustin_water. And on Facebook, it's Veda Austin @Water Researcher. So those are the 3 ways that people can contact me. And masterclass is if you want to learn the technique through a beginner's workshop, there's in the workshops tab. So that's the same place you can sign up for the masterclass. And then you can also just get the PDF of teaching how the technique, and you can also get my list of hydroglyphs there, and you can get a bundle which includes my study on dreams, whereby I basically put a petri dish of water beside my bed with the intention to pick up some part of my dream. And then when I would wake up in the morning and knew I'd dreamt, trying to grab onto the dream and forgotten it,
Yes.
I would freeze it. And the imagery in the ice was so incredibly clear that it would remind me and jog my entire memory of the dream. And so I did a study on there's about 20 dreams that I've talked about the dream. And so you can see that. And so what that's saying is that water somehow has traveled through the dream time. And how is that possible? So in the bundle, that's included in that, as well as my study on the marriage of salt and water, or the synergy of salt and water. And so there's lots of information there. I share every day on both platforms, social media, just so people can see it's not random. And because from what I've heard, it's some of the rare good news out there for people. It's like a nice little good news platform for people to see something really intriguing and new and kind of magical. And Arthur C. Clarke says that magic is only science we don't understand yet.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, everybody listening, I hope you learn so much and you connect with Veda to learn some real life magic. It's so beautiful. And thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing your time and energy with us today. We'd love to hear your feedback on how our podcast has impacted your life, and are also open to suggestions for new and interesting topics. Please leave your comments with a quick review to help us grow this magical community of wellness warriors and light workers. Every month, we select one lucky reviewer to win our big magic box, containing all 3 of our beautiful magic lattes. To connect with us further, check us out on Instagram at wild_remedies. Thank you again, and see you at the next episode.